three colonels and a crisis, what could possibly go wrong? Three of us have worked for IBM. Three of us are colonels. Four of us, however, are associated with the Naval Postgraduate School. All three of them attended some kind of master's or doctorate program there, while I taught them what Ken do and the rest of us teach. One of us is a tenured professor at West Point. He's been at West Point since he played football. And
not continuously,
but close. What, 10 years at West Point?
at least 6.
At least 6, yeah. Not tough duty.
Challenging.
Yeah, very, very tough duty.
Ready?
Colonel Vega organized this thing, so we'll let him go.
So, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for coming. Following lunch, it's always tough, so we thought we'd bring a little levity with the title. But the subject itself is not. So, when we talk about crisis response and some of the challenges that we've experienced, everyone has experienced crisis in one shape or form. But what we've done in our career, all of us, John and I both retired from the military, and we've really taken crisis management to the next level as our career. Not just us, but this is what we do. We save lives, and we go where no one else wants to go when the nation calls. And it's usually in harm's way, hostile, and in an infrastructure that's not necessarily safe, secure. It sounds a lot like cyberspace, cybersecurity as well. So we took some of those lessons learned, and now we're going to share them with you, marrying the two together. So I'm J.C. Vega, retired colonel from the Army, now with IBM Security. And my colleagues here are John Brickey. John, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Oh, I don't know what rooms, what environments Carlos was in. I was behind the firewall in my combat zone time. So, it's exactly like it is at MasterCard. So John Brickey, I retired just over 2 years ago while I was on faculty at West Point, and went right into a role at MasterCard where I'm Senior Vice President and Cybersecurity Evangelist.
Good afternoon. My name is Hise Gibson. I'm a colonel in the United States Army. I'm a tenured faculty at the United States Military Academy at West Point, Army helicopter pilot, and my prior operational role was as a battalion commander in the 82nd Airborne Division. But prior to that, worked doctoral studies at the Harvard Business School in technology and operations management. And so just excited to share different frameworks that may be able for you to leverage so that you can be even more effective in your day-to-day.
So I'm glad you brought up frameworks. You heard this morning from Mr. Ross, and Bill introduced him about NIST and the different frameworks that they provide. Well, we have a framework also that we use in hostile environments, and it's called the golden hour. What is a golden hour? The golden hour is this construct of when we send a soldier, sailor, Marine, airman in harm's way, that if he gets injured, that he can be at a level 1 trauma center within 1 hour. Anywhere in the world, that he can be at that level of care immediately. That does a lot. What does that do? It enables a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine to get out there and say, I know I'm going to be taken care of. I'm going to go in harm's way, but I will be taken care of. But it also sets a tone for everyone in the operation. So we're going to use that construct of the golden hour and share some stories with you that hopefully will be inspiring. When you leave here, you won't be intended not to scare you or uncertainty and doubt, but actually you can go out there and get things done right now. You can put things into action. So, Hise, you want to go over that golden hour a little bit?
And so for more context, when you think about the Army, a lot of corporations leverage the military for best practices. But the golden hour actually came from best practices from the civilian sector. It came out of an individual named R. Adam Cowley, who popularized the idea that if I'm able to have a system established that has appropriate equipment, appropriate people in the right place at the right time, I can increase survivability after trauma. And so over the 80s and 90s, if we think about our environments that we're in, there's a lot of trauma centers, urgent care systems, and data that exist. However, in the military, we're pretty siloed, generally. I'm sure there's Marines in here, there's Air Force folks possibly, maybe a naval person of some type, and then us Army guys. So we're pretty siloed. And so when we think about patient care, that is also very siloed. However, in 2001, a group of doctors from the different services came together in order to try to synchronize our operations in a way to leverage the data. And as it progressed in Iraq, the survivability of individuals is 10-1. If we look at the last century, it was only 4-1, wounded to fatalities. That was because of the data that these doctors came together and ensured everyone knew what was going on. And so in Iraq, it was less than an hour. However, at the same time in Afghanistan, it was 2. So in 2009, Secretary Gates made a mandate and established the golden hour for this service. And an example of that, I'll share with you from a real experience. When I was an operations officer in a large aviation battalion in Western Afghanistan, we had medical evacuation assets in my organization. And we provided medical evacuation support in the western portion of Afghanistan and the north. That the Germans, Spaniards, Italians, a lot of great espresso. We provide the medical evacuation support for them. I woke up one morning, did my run with my battalion commander like we did around the base. Fortunately, we did not get shot that day. It was fantastic, so I'm still here because we had Afghanis protecting our base, just for context. We had just moved assets to the north. I went to my operations center like a sock and watched my captains do what captains do and make things happen. But then a 9-line medical evacuation dropped, meaning someone was injured. A German soldier was injured in the northern portion of Afghanistan, 500 miles away from us. Normal operations happen. We're seeing things drop. Aircraft take off, but they go into what's known as a hot landing zone. Hot landing zone meaning that these Germans were being overrun by insurgents at the time. And so my captains are being all fired up and trying to ensure what's going on so we can tell our higher. Here's the challenge with this. The person managing the operation at the time was about a 19, 20-year-old private first class who'd only been in the Army for 2 years. She was managing the operation. She was in direct line of what was going on, and all we were doing, we were getting in her way. We were impeding her ability to function. And so as a leader person, I had to shut down my team to give the operation over to a 19-year-old who had only been in the Army 2 years while she manages this very volatile situation. So we fast forward. We did save the injured Germans, and we got them to there within 1 hour. They received awesome medals from the German government for saving people. But what kind of organization gives that kind of authority to a 19-year-old? How does that even happen? How would you feel right now if your strategic keyboarder right now who's protecting your network all of a sudden had you just gave him or her full authority? We do that every day. But we do it because of frameworks like mission command that I won't go into, but part of that mission command is that idea of commander's intent or leader's intent. We communicate in a very succinct way so that everyone understands what's going on. And so in order for the golden hour to operate, we have to have this commander's intent, which we provide the why something is going on, some purpose. We provide key tasks, not 20 things, but 3 to 5, that if not done, nothing else will be able to be successful. And an end state, which is what I've found over the past couple of years are challenging for all leaders. We all don't want to be accountable. We'll know when we see it. How often have you heard that, or have you been the person saying it? But when you provide the end state, your team can understand what needs to happen. And it can be vague. Golden hour, we will get an injured soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine to the first line care within 1 hour. The commander's intent is in that one sentence. And we can unpack it and break it down in a way to understand our left and right limits. And as an operations officer managing a 750-person organization in Afghanistan, I was able to shut my team down to give the fight over to the private first class, who did a phenomenal job because she understood the commander's intent. She understood why she was there, what to do, and at the end of the day, we just want to get the individual back to the first line of care as soon as possible.
Talking about commander's intent, that makes me think of when we first started doing exercises. Back when I was doing artillery in the Army and was introduced to the idea of cyber warfare and those sorts of things, we saw all kinds of potential, like, wow, we could do this and we could do that. But the commander's intent was, don't break my network so that I can do my exercise. And for a long time, it was all about, well, we don't want to introduce cyber yet because we have so much else we have to get done. We've got to be able to communicate. We can't shut down the exercises so that we can introduce cyber into it. And it was probably over a decade, almost 2 decades before I saw the integration of that when I was at U.S. Cyber Command. And we finally had specific forces designated across the military who could then inject cyber scenarios into unified commanders' exercise plans and could actually carry those out so that we could see the impact of cyber and how important it was to defend against that. After leaving U.S. Cyber Command and going to MasterCard, I saw the same thing. And as Hise was saying, we have, I wouldn't say too junior of a guy there, but we have someone in charge of our enterprise resilience. And when he gets up and embarks commands, when we come together for our exercises, everyone's focused. And you have a member of the board, you have all kinds of people in the room there who are really taking direction. Everyone knows their role. So we're all about having the right people at the right place, at the right time to conduct our exercises. And I happen to use leader's intent quite a bit now at MasterCard with the team that I have.
So from that understanding, that commander's intent defines the end state. What should you do? Because a crisis isn't going to wait for the leadership to make decisions. This is our discipline, our domain is a little bit different than normal crisis. It's happening at machine speed. The technology, you have an active adversary against you. Someone who's smart, who likely has the advantage over you because these are advanced persistent threats. They know what you're going to do. If you have your personnel waiting for your guidance, they may wait too long and actually let the challenge, the adversary spread and have its will, because they're going to look at how you operate and they're going to use that against you. So the idea is empowering your individuals to take the necessary action. Lean forward. Don't lean back. Don't be on your heels. Empower your people. Underwrite their behavior, their actions, within the limits that you identify, but that is all discussed in advance. You don't want to do that at the time of crisis. So, 3 colonels in crisis, what could go wrong? Let's go about what could go wrong. I'm in South Korea. APEC is going on at that time, and I have all the world leaders coming to Korea. I had just come back from a 3-month training in the United States, and I was stationed in Korea. You immediately get a call that I'm going to go spend 3 months in a bunker at night, no windows, anything, Army training. Whew.
That's hard for an aviator.
It's hard for an aviator.
Both of them.
We're both aviators.
With the infantry and artillery.
And we get there, and our job is, at that time I transitioned to information technology with an emphasis in cybersecurity, and we set up the SOC, the Operations Center, to be able to monitor everything going on in our area of operation. And wherever we had blind spots, we put cameras up. We had the old CCTVs all over the southern part of the country where we were operating just in case anything would happen. We had helicopters flying north, south, east, west, and we would practice, just in case something went wrong. Well, one night, I was on the night shift. As we all know, the night shift is the B team. I was a major. I had a full colonel who's 10 years my senior running the day shift, but in this case, it was a night shift, and I was running the night shift. Well, our Secretary of State was at a dinner, at a function with her peers, at Condoleezza Rice. As she was leaving, protests started to pop up. Now, this country is known for protests, and some of them turn violent. And you never know how it's going to go, because the MO of those who are violent extremists is they embed with the peaceful protesters, and it just blows up. And there I am watching these hotspots pop up on the cameras, and then I see the route that our Secretary of State is taking to return back to her safe place, which was a hotel near the ocean. The only problem with that was her primary route was leading straight to the protesters. The alternate route was leading to protesters. The contingency route was leading to protesters. The emergency route was leading to protesters. And we had practiced all those routes. What do you do at that time? What could go wrong? Put a junior guy in charge. Well, luckily for me, who's played Grand Theft Auto before? Having all the cameras where I can see what's going on the ground, having a map and being able to track the movement of the vehicle, we had planned on something happening, not this, but we had direct communications with the driver. And no kidding, it's go 100 meters, turn right, now. Go down the alley. At the end of the alley, you're going to make a left turn. Now you're going to make a right. And we vectored, that's the aviation training, vectoring people.
I just shot artillery. We had to get the right vector, though.
We vectored her and her entourage into a base that we had in South Korea, where we were at. And she came in, and we regrouped, and we had to reanalyze how is she now going to get back to the hotel. But now we had time. But the challenge with that, or the lesson learned there, is you have to train like you fight and fight like you train. We didn't anticipate that exact scenario, but we anticipated having to have communication with the driver. We anticipated having to have visibility on the environment. We anticipated these actions that collectively we practiced just about everything, but in this instance, it came together based on all the practice. So when you're practicing your crisis response, your cyber crisis response, you need, I recommend, best practice, do that under load, where you're putting pressure on your people, you're putting pressure on your technology, you're putting pressure on your processes, you're also putting pressure on your structure. If your folks who need a decision are unable to contact that senior person who's going to make the decision, there's something wrong or something that you need to address in your structure there. How all this occurs is when you practice, again, train like you fight, fight like you train, so that when you actually get to a real crisis, it may not go as you planned, because the threat, the enemy, always gets a vote. So what you have to do is practice all the different scenarios so that you know how to react and how the people around you are going to react.
Use the word drill.
Battle drills.
Battle drills, we call them.
Yeah.
Yep, battle drills.
So Carlos is talking about that. It reminds me of when in 2005 I was assigned to U.S. Northern Command in Colorado Springs. I was an advisor to the commander. And of course, Hurricane Katrina, that was late August. When that happened, we hadn't been able to fully exercise a lot of the pieces. The structure of the new command, U.S. Northern Command, it was barely a year old, fully operational. So there's only so much you can do in a year in terms of working out all the kinks. And every event, if you think about it, although you can follow a structure, every event's unique, especially in the United States, because we have 54, essentially 54 governors. They're the commander for their terrain. Unless the president declared martial law or something like that, you're going to follow what the local commander says. So during Hurricane Katrina, and I know this is going back a long ways, this is pre-cyber, Homeland Security, Homeland Defense was the big thing. That's where a lot of money was going, mainly because of 9/11. But what happened there was the governor said, I need everything. And the federal government said, okay, how do you want this to work? This way, and she got upset. Said, I don't want to see org charts. I want everything. And they said, okay, we can come in and take over. She said, no, I don't want that. I want my people in charge. Okay, do you want your people in charge or do you want everything? So they didn't know how to do the command and control structure the best way. What they decided was we'll have one task force in Mississippi, one in Louisiana, and then we'll have a federal joint task force led by General Honore, and we'll all just work together, and we'll divide up the lanes. That worked to some extent, but it was very inefficient at first. So we learned a lot of lessons, and because of that, the structure changed in the future. They went to what they call a dual status command, and that was very useful in the military. At MasterCard, when it comes to our exercises, we're very cognizant of what the structure is, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, and we spent $1 billion on security in the last 3 years. And a good chunk of that is on exercises, making sure that everyone knows their battle drills, making sure everyone knows who's in charge, what the structure is, where do I fall in to do this. And just for example, last year we did 26 global exercises. This year, the demand blew through the roof once people realized how useful that was. This year we did 46. And our resilience team is asking, hey, we need more people, we need maybe fewer exercises, but we're getting better at how we do it, and now we have a special staff just for exercising.
And as you think about what John just highlighted, as you do more and more exercise, you get better. So you don't have to focus on everything. You can narrow down and focus on those pain points. And key to what Carlos highlighted is being under load, because at some point, as leaders in whatever space you're in, you have to be very comfortable being uncomfortable. Right now, all of our networks are being charged and poked at this very moment. We all know this. But you're sitting right here, so everything must be okay. Well, maybe.
The phone's not ringing.
However, through the exercise process that we've all done in the military, where we do this underload every month. Thank you for paying your taxes. Every month, there's a group of 10 to 15,000 soldiers, sailors, and airmen sitting at different places around the globe, training constantly. And what that does is create a shared understanding. So the issue that happened in Katrina between the federal and local governments was an inability to have a shared understanding because of the siloed nature in which we operate. I mean, in the military, we have silos too. There's the personnel person and the operations person. The personnel person does not like the operations person, normally. The same thing happens.
That's just you.
It could be me. Same thing in the corporate sector. But through these drills, the ability to create that shared understanding and trust that then you're allowed to empower others can actually happen. So just as a best practice, you can drill or practice, because how many times have you said, we got this? And the moment, at least whenever I've heard someone say, we got this, or in a helicopter, hey, watch this, I immediately get scared. It immediately reminds me that we probably need to practice. Because it's much better to practice when there's no crisis in order to be prepared when one occurs.
Somebody said it, we train as we fight, as we train, as we fight, as we train. Don't overlook that. And it was said so quietly that maybe not everybody heard it. But that's an important concept. And it's related to the concept of drill. We used to talk about taking backup and recovery plans and testing them. We don't do that anymore. Now we drill, And depending upon who you've got backup and recovery agreements with, you may find that you have to do it at least quarterly and keep records of how it went. Because the backup and recovery people have learned that if you do not drill, then in the crisis situation, you will not be able to take advantage of the facilities which you are paying them to provide.
Can I just ask, how effective do you find things like desktop exercises as a preliminary step for seeing how methodologies or interactions might work as you get?
Question is the effectiveness of desktop exercises.
So that's a necessary part, but that's not all of it. So the idea is you have to practice as a whole of business when you talk about crisis response. So if you're doing a desktop for just the security folks, or just the IT folks, or just your director, just your division, that's necessary. But how are you integrating that with those left and right of you? And we use the mantra of you crawl first, then you walk, and then you run. And for us aviators, then you fly. There's different ways of getting to that. I know many of you here know me from the cyber range up in Cambridge. And if you don't know about it, feel free to ask, but I can't tell you everything. That's a surprise, and so I'll let you tell part of it. But the idea of really bringing the experience to life really makes the most impact. But I'm going to transition from that question to who do you involve? And you're not in it alone. So John, if you don't mind kind of covering the bigger picture there.
So bringing it from a desktop with one entity in the organization to a larger organization to a cross organization. Again, a lesson that we learned in Hurricane Katrina was that some of the states had these emergency management assistance compacts, or EMACs they called them, where basically it says, hey, if I run out of resources and something really bad happens, will you help me out? And they mutually agree to do that. You see a lot of times utilities. Nowadays you see it all the time, right? You see convoys of utilities going down to a disaster area. Well, back then that wasn't all that common, but they learned through that they really had to have these partnerships, and they had to have them in advance. You don't want to exchange business cards when something bad happens. So it's important, and that was going around back in 2004 when I was at Northcom, with that phrase, which applies today. So you want to make sure that you're able to partner and to have a meaningful relationship, which is much better today at that level with U.S. Northcom, with the states. They've changed a lot of their processes because of that, and we're learning from that. Whenever we do our big events, so our big events here in Purchase, New York, right up the road. We have a tech hub here in the city, our international headquarters up the road, and we bring in FBI from the city. They come up and participate with us. It's good to know who that person is, because you don't want to go through all the red tape to find somebody when you really need them. So and we have our own range where we do technical exercises with partners. So we bring together, this year we brought together 7 other financials where we hacked each other, defended, fought each other tooth and nail for 2 days. But then we lead that with better connections to other organizations, and we share across those organizations through a mutual NDA.
Tell me what a range is.
So our cyber range is a technical environment where everyone uses a browser. Well, they use different tools. They're able to attack each other, have kind of generic enterprise resources that everybody has their own, and we attack into each other, totally separated from the real world, so they can't cause harm outside of that, our range environment. Just like in the military, where you have your aviation or your tank range, and we know where the rounds will likely impact in most cases. It's similar to that. We want to make sure we contain the malware.
I'm an artilleryman. Tell me about ranges.
So many people get their own impression what a range is. It's a place where you can practice. A practice in an area that is safe. In other words, the outcome isn't going to impact your operation. But that could be something as a leadership reaction course, how your leaders are going to react. So in essence, you can say the tabletop is a type of range exercise because you're bringing the people together. There's also the technical side that John mentions, and there's red teaming, there's capture the flags, that are all sorts of environments where you get to test your skill. Now, what we do in Cambridge at IBM, and we do it at a few other places, is we take it to a next level. We're testing teams. We're testing operations. We're seeing how your organization is going to react, not just how the technical team is going to react. And for those of you who have been to the range, you let me know if I'm telling the truth or not. It's an emotional experience, but so is a real threat. So is a real crisis. It's an emotional experience.
What I like about that is, and I've been to the range too, so we do exercises similar to that, and people are uncomfortable during that event. And we're okay with that. We want people to be uncomfortable when we do our exercises, but we want them to seek the right answers, go find the right people, and work through that level of discomfort.
Hise, you've been to the range.
I have, and as you think about your own organizations, it is not your technical expertise that is the issue. It's just not. We have extremely competent, capable, smart individuals and teammates working with us. But what I found in my own command was the crawl, walk, run phase was imperative because all of my team said, we got it. So we had to go camping. I had to take them camping so we can practice our systems, make sure we can put up a tent, make sure our systems can work. And then we can, after we have accomplished those basic things, we can now talk about how are we integrating across different domains. And so when you think about, to me, when I think about the cyber range, technical competence is intact, but it's about, do I really know what I need to do when something happens? It's better for me to do it in a closed environment now than when something really happens and I start losing market share and I have an issue that now my reputation is damaged because I was breached. So those are things that, at least in the military, we do the exact same thing through warfighters. We practice simulation and games in a sterile environment all the time.
But at some point, we drill with real weapons and live ammunition, and we fly real airplanes.
And that's what happens every month at an awesome location. I recommend you never go, called the Joint Readiness Training Center in western Louisiana. Fantastic place, spent a lot of time there. It's always hot, large mosquitoes, but it's a perfect place to train, and we bring disparate units together every month to go against a world-class opposing force that always wins, that is a tenth of the size of the organization that's in the field fighting them.
I just want to riff off that a second. So the interesting thing about being in the military is you don't have to worry about thinking about like food and sometimes where you sleep and all that. Soldiers think about that well in advance. They'll bring their own supply, and someone's job is to make sure that's there. But what I noticed in corporate America was, short of taking everyone camping, when we start talking through a large-scale exercise, not quite tabletop, but much bigger than that, the interesting things come up that a lot of people don't think about their daily jobs, like, what am I going to do about my daycare? What if I have to go pick up my kids tonight? What am I going to do about sleeping? Who's going to bring food in to us at midnight? In the old days, you always knew when a war was about to kick off because pizzas were being delivered to the Pentagon, right? That was the old, I don't know if it was a myth or not, because there are tunnels, but those kinds of things come up when you do these real, get people into their roles and make them think through it. And that came up without us making them camp. So if we would have actually kept them overnight, a lot more issues would have come up.
So going off of that, what could go wrong when you practice? So 2010 timeframe, we were preparing to close down Iraq. I was the organization that was going to go over there and take charge of the entire country, and we were going to close it down. I had the responsibility of securing the networks here in the United States, getting them prepared, boxing them up, sending them forward, and closing down the initial Iraq operation. As we were practicing, as we were training, like we were talking about, you train until it becomes second nature. On our secret network, we got a phone call from one of the three-letter agencies that said, there's something your network is doing, and you have a computer that's phoning home. There's no computer that should be phoning home on this network. Well, what's it doing? Well, it's scanning IP addresses, you know, the IP address .1, .2, .3, .4, and then just going all the way down through every port. And it's doing this in mass. Oh boy, what do we do? Let's update that. Now there's 2. Now there's 4. Now there's 16 and 32 and 64. All of our computers, here I have a 3-star level command getting ready to go to war, and we're doing our final checks in this compound. I can't figure out what's going on. My techs cannot figure it out. Now, because we were the number 2 priority in the Army at that time, number 1 priority were the ones that were in Iraq. We were still here in the United States. We were number 2 priority. That's still pretty high. First thing I did was I asked for help all around this base that I was at, which was the largest base in the United States. I had special help with me. I had a blue team, the good guys helping us. I had a red team, the bad guys trying to test us. And we had a green team that's kind of helping us along, coaching us along. And said, what is this? Are you guys doing this? No, it's not us. What is this? We couldn't figure it out. We had a lot of special operations guys around us who have their own budgets, their own IT guys. Hey, my buddies, what's going on? Help. We don't know. I called all the infrastructure there, didn't know what was going on. I had to go tell the general, we need to shut down the network before everything's compromised because we're going to have to re-image everything we have. This was before ransomware. I went and told him, I had already been working with him for quite a bit. He trusted me and he said, do what you got to do. I got it, no problem. The conversation before that was to my boss to say, sir, we got to tell the general to shut this down. You know what his response was? I'm not telling him. I'm not telling him. You're the security guy. You talk about punt. It wasn't a punt, it was a big kick in the butt. But I want to know that ahead of time next time. What kind of support am I going to have from the people around me? Which gets into knowing the capability and capacity of your partners. This was before Army Cyber. This was before a lot of the infrastructure that we have now. When I finally got someone at the Army Computer Emergency Response group, their response was, send us a hard drive and we'll let you know if there's anything interesting in there. I hung up. You are of no use to me. We are going to fight this out on our own. And that is when I became a serious evangelist for cybersecurity for the Army. Because here I am, pretty smart guy at the time for cybersecurity, and our entire infrastructure was dead in the water. We had no capacity to do this. We've improved in the last 9-10 years. But even today, if you call the FBI for help, what are you expecting? If you call your incident response team that you have right now on retainer, what do you really expect them to do? And what if you call them and there's a crisis across here, let's say New York City here right now? They can't respond to everyone. They're going to triage this somehow, and you may or may not meet that cut line. So the idea of practicing, train like you fight, fight like you train, incorporate your partners, because that's where you get to measure their capability and capacity. You get to see their plan. And part of your next funding round or your next decision points may be, I need to raise the standard of my partners because I have dependencies out there that I can't change. It is what it is. Why does the United States government invest in these foreign countries? Why are there runways that no country in Africa will ever own a plane big enough to land there? It's not for them. They can use it. It's for us. So measure the training, the capability and capacity of your partners Because when this happens, you're not going to do this alone. And to what you talked about, exchanging business cards, I like to say, you practice, you train, and you prepare like this is going to be your Super Bowl. You're scouting talent. You're scouting things that you can do way in advance. And you're identifying weaknesses in your plan now, because when that happens, you want to perform like a Super Bowl team. The alternative, it's a pickup game. Whoever happens to be there is who you're going to go to war with.
Another lesson I've learned in industry now is, besides changing business cards, we hire those folks. So we hire Secret Service. My boss is former Secret Service. We hire military like myself. We hire ex-CIA. We hire people who understand this environment, have rehearsed it, and have been in the thick of it in a time of crisis.
How many of you are prepared for a ransomware attack? How many of you have an agreement with your management as to how much time you have to recover from a ransomware attack? Mean time to recovery, objective. That's what we call the leadership's vision of the end state, right? And if you don't have it written down, if you don't have an agreement, you know the story about the 3 envelopes, right? Make 3 envelopes, because the chances that you're going to get hit with ransomware are going up daily, and it's a good way to lose your job. One of the things that concerns me in general is that we go to management and we tell them we need this, that, or the other thing, or we want to do this, that, or the other thing, and management says no. And we don't write it down and put it in the drawer. When management says no, you present them with a little document called a risk acceptance document that says, you agreed to this, please sign here. And then you put that in the file, and you bring it out when things go wrong. But we need to be forcing management to acknowledge the risk that they are taking, and we need to document that.
And that's one of the important lessons learned is, in the military, we call it intelligence preparation of the battlefield. It's not only understanding your threat. It's understanding the entire ecosystem that you're operating in. It also is understanding the friendly forces, your partners. What do they bring to the table? And who is a priority of effort? So the idea of this threat intelligence that is out there, how are you leveraging that to manage your risk? You cannot protect against everything, every time, everywhere. You have to decide where you're going to invest. How do you do that? Based on the threat.
And as you think about the different threats, you're actually managing people, processes, and technology. And as John highlighted, there is a group of folks who exist who can come in from different agencies or different backgrounds who are already what I would call, in my research, T-shaped. They're folks who have a deep core competency in a specific area, but over multiple experiences over years, they've been exposed in a way to become a little bit broader. And as we think about the cyber landscape, very few folks who are in cyber, who are in charge, are actually cyber. They came from somewhere else. And only over the next decade will there be true, fundamental, core cyber individuals. But is management providing those opportunities to create the T-shaped leaders required to manage crisis in a meaningful way? That's just a question. There are things that are happening in different organizations that is occurring, but that's normally a blind spot. And I'm not worried about a JP Morgan Chase, but 2 or 3 levels downstream, that's where the vulnerabilities exist.
I think we're taking any questions at this time. I think we're at the...
So you made a lot of references to training and desktop exercises and real training and training under pressure. And obviously, I would expect that as military background, a key factor for you is always readiness. And when you mentioned that the training is not so much about the technical expertise, but about what's going to happen in the moment, would you recommend that training should be conducted in a less prepared way to say, oh, next Tuesday we're going to train this way, where everybody comes with their bag of tools ready? Or do we just show up one morning and say, guess what, we've just been hacked, and we start from there? And how do you do something like that in a business in a way you have to manage everyone's expectations and not make it truly a surprise where everybody panics, but understand that we're going to work in that sort of a training environment at some point?
I'll take it first. And so I think that's a great question. I would recommend not just like dropping your folks on the deep end of the pool, so to speak, but it's a gradual buildup. And as the people in charge of your different divisions or areas, you'll know when is the opportune time to do that in order to test and place load on your individuals. I mean, we do these kind of alerts. That's a very normal construct in the military. But when you think about, we create value-based human capital at scale and train at a level to where we can do those things. But in the corporate sector, I think it would take just a little bit longer to get to that level of you've been hacked and moving forward. But I think Carlos and John, based on their experiences in their different ranges, would have a better answer.
So it depends is kind of a general answer. If you're supporting customers and you can accept that, then by all means. If you can do it in a way that doesn't impact your business actual customers, because we get penalized and such. So it depends on what the company does and what the service level agreement is. But it reminds me of back in the Army too, is we would never announce when we're doing a urinalysis, right? You just don't announce it, you do it. And then you do it again when they least expect it. But in business, I think that's a good strategy when after you crawl, walk, run, and you understand what the impact is to the business.
So I'd go back to the train like you fight like you train. If you're a crisis response, if you have a procedure that you do, how are you incorporating that into your day-to-day operations? What you see some of the larger organizations and more mature customers doing is creating these fusion teams where people go and work together from different areas of operations within the organization on a regular basis. I know John's organization recently put one in a few years ago because we went and checked it out. In the military, we do that regularly, and we train for that at our facility. But the idea of that is not something you stand up when you have the crisis. It's something that is always stood up, or you're familiar with who you're going to call.
It's business as usual now because there are different levels of crises. So if you're dealing with something that before didn't rise to the level of an exercise, but now you're used to dealing with it in a fusion center where you have different business lines coming together, then when you get to a crisis, they're used to working together. It goes back to the partnership.
We had a question in the back.
Yeah, I did. My question is more around governance, okay? So risk management accepts the risk. That's not a new concept. But what is a new concept is the various layers of defenses that companies have put in. So they have a CIO, which they had in the past. Now they have a privacy officer, chief privacy officer. Then they have a CISO. Then they have an architect. Then they have a technology officer. Then they have a SOX compliance officer. I can go on and on and on. So who should sign the management accepts the risk? That's number one. And how should it be reported to the board?
The line of business manager is not a staff manager.
So I'll take the stab on the first one there. So at least I'm not in charge of GRC, governance risk compliance at MasterCard, but I did say to Holiday Inn Express. No, I do work with them regularly, almost daily. And what I've seen is that in security, we're not the ones accepting the risk. We're advising them of the risk. The business unit accepts the risk. And so that's a standard practice at MasterCard. The data privacy, chief data officer or data privacy, they define the classifications of data, et cetera, define the governance for that. We provide assessments on the risk. We rate it. We go back to the business unit. They sign for the risk. They accept it, and they work with us to help mitigate that. But it's not on us.
And I think the important part of it, that it depends on your organization. And getting that decision or that information to the decision maker who is authorized to accept the risk. And our construct from the military, I used to tell my people, don't write any checks that your butt can't cash. Don't write them for me either. I accept this much risk, and then I have to go to my boss. And the idea is, where is your organization defining its risk? And who's the person who's responsible for that? What you're seeing, and I think it's very appropriate, is it's now going to the board level. Because their job is to advise the organization. Who advises them? That's going to be depending on how your organization is organized. There's no cookie cutter, but the idea is, don't let the structure, we talk about people, processes, technology, I always throw in structure. Don't let the structure get in the way of decision making. So that's going to have to be defined by your organization.
And it has to be codified. It has to be written down. At every level, at least for us, we understand who is on the line. And as John highlighted, is an advisory role. Even as a battalion commander, there are certain risks that I could not assume, and I would have to kick those levels up to the commanding general, because I can assume the risk. I can only advise, and he would assume the risk. And if he accepted it, we did it, no matter what it is. And so just understanding that, but it's codified. There's a book for it.
It is a challenge in very large organizations because you got to understand who actually owns it. You know, you have a lot of infrastructure, and big challenges going back to the CIS controls. Number one, inventory, is understanding who owns that service or that device.
Second question,
that data.
how often should go to the board? So let's say they sign off on the risk, but it's the same risk 5 years, and maybe the board's not aware of it anymore. So to answer the second question, how often should this risk acceptance be reported to the board?
It should, a documented risk acceptance should have a definite termination date written into the risk acceptance. Normally no more than 1 year, or the tenure of the manager who signs. So if he gets canned, you got to go to his replacement with it and get it done again.
Military's good about that. Commander changes out, everything's going to get re-signed for.
Okay, my question is around risk acceptance as well. So what is your answer or response when somebody asks you in the business, right, what level of risk am I accepting? And you really don't know the answer. You don't know if it's a 40% risk or an 80% risk. Like, how do you manage that answer?
And it's one of my biggest complaints about American management is the failure to express the level of risk tolerance for the organization in such a way that every manager throughout the hierarchy knows how much risk he's entitled to take. When I was a junior manager at IBM, they told me that if anything went wrong, a breach, a fraud, a significant error, there must have been at least 2 people involved in committing it. That was an expression of risk acceptance. General management said, if there were 2 people involved, you're covered. But if one person did it all by themselves, heads are going to roll. Now, security staff is responsible for helping general management express risk tolerance. And generally, you should be presenting the board with 3 different expressions of 3 different levels so that they can choose. Notice, if you are a brand new organization, one of these startups that we talk about all the time, your business risk is so high that you can tolerate almost any level of cyber risk. If you are JP Morgan Chase or MasterCard or the United States Army, you can't do that, right? You've got to have you have to have a more reasonable level of business risk, normally accepted business risk. That's an expression, okay? If everybody else is doing it, you're covered. That's normal expression of business risk. But it's security's job to write that risk acceptance in such a way that general management knows what it's telling people to do. And then people understand what they're doing.
So we do present it to the board, what is the risk appetite, but then when we get down to actually providing that information, we acquired a company over in Europe that is very experienced in using the FAIR methodology, and so we're adopting the FAIR methodology because it puts it in more quantifiable terms. So that, I'm not saying it's for everybody, I'd just say for us, we've decided to go that route because we like the end result and the ability to communicate that to everyone.
And they use like high, medium, and low, or do they use like actual
Dollar
percentages?
amounts.
Dollar amounts.
Dollar
Okay,
amounts.
got it.
Everyone understands that.
Thank you.
And that's a good way. That's a good way to present it to general management. At what point do I have to buy insurance? At what point are you prepared to self-insure? And beyond that, we have to go out and assign the remaining residual risk to some underwriter for dollar amount. At what point does that take place? Lots of the New York banks have a risk officer. He's not the guy who lends money and makes decisions about loans and the risk on loans. Bankers do that. But he's the guy who deals with the insurance companies and decides on management's behalf. At this point, this residual risk is more than we can tolerate, and we have to assign it to an underwriter, and we do that for a fee. So that's one way of helping general management understand what they're saying, is at what point do you want us to go out and buy insurance? They understand that part.
And keep in mind, that is not a static state, especially in crisis. What is permissible when you're not in crisis is different than when you're in crisis. Spending limits change, authorities change. We talked about how Northcom did it with the state of Louisiana. Well, as you all know, Louisiana recently had a ransomware attack to their education system there. And the decision that the governor made was the first time that a crisis cyber emergency, state of emergency, was initiated. The one in Colorado was an executive order, not the same as Louisiana, as Louisiana pointed out to me. What that did is that released a lot of resources across the state. So it reached a level of tolerance or level of risk that initiated a lot of other actions. So that risk level is not static.
And as you think about risk is a very nebulous term. It's part of our military framework. We call it prudent risk, but it's like a soft thing. And so, which is why we continuously operationalize what that is in different areas of the military, across the armed forces. And in different areas based on your function, there's different risk tolerance that is very well defined. And then there's always a commander's discretion. There's always a leader's discretion based on risk tolerance.
I think we're out of time, are we? Yep.
Just heard, go back to your organizations and do at least one thing differently than you were doing it when you sat down.
I would say find out who your first responder is when you leave here. To get actionable information. Who's the FBI person in your community? What's their name? What's their phone number? And when's the last time you called them? Or Secret Service.
Make sure you can make some MasterCard, we're going to have to pay.
Please pull out a MasterCard, yes.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.